This is probably the two ways that I think are probably the easiest for you, that will make the most sense, and that will be probably the most straightforward and quickest way to become a sports psychologist. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phil Sarpon. This is Phil's Guide to PsyD. This channel is dedicated to all things psychology, wellness, and graduate school. If it's your first time here, what I do on this channel is that I answer any questions that you guys may have about graduate school. The question today is about sports psychology. Now, I've done a previous video about sports psychology, about basically how to become a sports psychology, what sports psychologists do. But I also wanted to do an additional video about just clarifying a couple things that I mentioned in that video, and basically the most straightforward way in terms of how to become a sports psychologist in the US. All right, so there are a lot of information out there, and I had to talk to a lot of other sports psychologists in my area to really get clarity on this, because it is kind of really confusing. So basically, what I mentioned in my previous video is that there's two big main certifications to go through in terms of becoming a sports psychologist. What I will say is that there are those two main ways that you can look into, but I'm going to clarify, and I'm going to probably concentrate on these two potential ways that I think are going to be a lot more helpful for you guys moving forward, especially if you are looking to become a clinical psychologist or you're looking to go into a counseling psychology program. All right, so here are the two ways. Actually, I'll probably throw in a third way, because I think a third way might also help as well. Now, the first way, which is something that I already talked about in my previous video, is the CMPC certification. Now, this certification has been revamped over the decades, but it is probably the gold standard in terms of becoming a sports psychologist. In fact, most Olympian teams, programs only will hire sports psychologists that have this certification. The certification is good for people who have a doctorate, but also people who have a master's program in some type of psychology or health-related field. So you don't have to have a doctorate in order to have this certification. You could be a master's level therapist or get a master's in psychology, tag on this certification, and work right away with athletes. So this is great because the doctorate isn't necessary. You save time, you save money, and you get to invest in yourself specifically in this way. As I mentioned, this is probably going to be the gold standard, and I think 10, 20, 30 years from now, a lot of places that are looking to hire sports psychologists are going to want or prefer people to have this certification. So in other words, I don't think you can go wrong with the certification. Now, this may be difficult because a lot of you may be in clinical or counseling psychology, and it may be really, really difficult to try and get the certification while you're in graduate school, or maybe even after you're in graduate school. And so what I would recommend, and these are some of the things to look out for, is that the certification does involve you basically having another additional practicum site. You have to get supervision from a sports psychologist. The website details all of those information, and it does make it a lot easier for you to connect to other sports psychologists in your area. So here's the thing, here's what I would recommend. Even if you're not looking to go into the certification, but you have other further additional questions about sports psychology, I would go into that website and see the directory of individuals and professionals that have that certification, and reach out specifically to those individuals, because they'll be better able to answer your questions better than me. I've known a lot of students have to take extra courses like sports psychology or maybe a biomechanics course. It is a lot of work to make sure that you have the right courses, that you are having the right supervision and clinical skills, and then you also do have to take a written exam at the end of it. It's a multiple choice exam that you have to take. Now, if you are going into your clinical psychology program or counseling psychology program, not only is this going to look great in terms of you being able to work with athletes, but what's really great is that there's a lot of programs that are looking for doctorates. They're looking to hire doctorates because counseling or clinical psychologists who have this certification, not only can they work with abnormal psychology or really some intense mental health illnesses, but then they could also work with athletes and coaches and so forth. So a lot of times you'll actually see a preference for organizations to bring on someone who's a clinical psychologist or a counseling psychologist. Because they have a doctorate, they'll be able to work with a lot more conditions than just athletes. For people who have a master's level degree that is not related to counseling or therapy, but let's just say it's just related to just a general master's degree, if they get this certification and they're not a therapist or a counselor, they technically cannot do therapy with this individual. They can only do coaching. So the benefit of having a master's level therapist or counseling or clinical psychology degree is that it allows you to not just do the coaching, but also the therapy side of it. And if you know anything about sports psychology, you know that you are probably going to come and interact with, at some point, people who are not only dealing with sports psychology related mental health things, but also sort of the abnormal psychology that could be intertwined with that as well. The other thing that seems to be the most helpful, and this is for people who are in undergrad right now, is that maybe you are looking to figure out how to become a sports psychologist. You don't know whether or not to go into a PhD, PsyD program, PhD program. You don't know whether or not to go into a master's of sports psychology, or you don't know what other master's level thing that you need to go into. If you just want to work with athletes, if you just want to maybe even just do therapy, the master's level therapist seems probably to be the best way to go, because you're going to save more money, you'll save more time, you'll be able to get your master's and then take the certification and then go right into working with athletes. And so the benefit would be to probably get a master's in sports psychology specifically. The reason that I say sports psychology, or maybe even like biomechanics or exercise science, or maybe a master's in psychology, is that it's going to have a lot of the courses that are required by the CMPC are going to fit in with getting a master's in sports psychology. So now, right now, it's not absolutely required to have the CMPC certification in order to do sports psychology with clients or patients. It's just highly recommended. So there's a number of sports psychologists that just have a master's in sports psychology, but they have a number of different work-related experiences that helps them to be very proficient and competent at what they do. So if you're not sure about the certification, but you do know you want to get into a master's in sports psychology, that might be also a really good alternative option. And if you get the master's in sports psychology and you want to get the certification, the CMPC certification in the future, that will always be there for you. Now, again, if you do not have a therapy or counseling degree, you cannot do therapy with these athletes, you can just do coaching. But if you do have some type of master's level therapist degree or psychology degree, you can do both. You can do therapy as well as the coaching as well. So hopefully all of that makes sense. Here's the other thing too. Maybe you are already in graduate school, and this is the third thing that I'll say. Maybe you are already in graduate school, you don't want to get a master's in sports psychology, and you don't really want to go into the CMPC. Well, there is a third option. There are sports psychology internship sites that are APA approved, that after you get done with your clinical psychology degree or your counseling psychology degree, you can apply for these internships. And if you go into this internship, you will probably have more opportunities to potentially do a postdoc right after that, or maybe get more experience after that and start working with athletes. Again, it's not absolutely required that you have a CMPC certification, and it's not absolutely required that you have a master's in sports psychology. What is probably recommended is that you have some type of experience working with athletes in some type of, whether it's with your program, your clinical psychology program, whether it's with your internship, or whether it's with postdoc. So if you can get that experience, whether it's in your practicum sites, whether it's in internship, or whether it's in postdoc, that will probably put you in the right position to actually start working with athletes and start doing sports psychology on your own. And then of course, if you ever want to at any point in time, you can always go back to the CMPC certification and do that if you think it's absolutely necessary, or if you're working in an environment that is requiring it for their employees. Hopefully that all makes sense. I'm gonna leave down some links below that you guys can check out, that you can search out what internship sites are giving sports psychology experiences and are allowing their interns to really actually work specifically with athletes. I will say this, if you are in a site that is not necessarily focused on sports psychology, there is a way to kind of get that experience, especially if you are working as an intern in a counseling medical center or a counseling school center, university setting. There are ways to really try and push your supervisor to just give you athletes for you to kind of get your feet wet and get working in terms of your experience working with athletes. So there are different ways that you can go into it. I would check out APA Division 47, which is a Society for Sports, Exercise, and Performance Psychology that will give you guys so much more details and hopefully connect you guys with professionals that are also working in the field. If you guys have any questions at all, please put it down in the comment section below. If you have not already, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video.